Sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary places. A busy street corner, a late evening commute, a stranger walking by. These are the settings where miracles unfold, where one person's compassion can rewrite another person's entire story. This is not a fairy tale. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Marcus Williams, a successful CEO who thought he was just heading home from another long day at the office, and Emma Rodriguez, a 17-year-old girl whose world had crumbled around her just hours before. What Marcus discovered at that bus stop on a freezing December night would challenge everything he thought he knew about responsibility, family, and the power of human kindness. What Emma found in that unexpected encounter would become the bridge between despair and hope, between survival and truly living. This is their story. A story that proves sometimes the family we need most isn't the one we're born into, but the one that chooses to see us, to care, and to say those four life-changing words, "You're safe with me." The December wind cut through downtown Chicago like a blade, carrying with it the promise of snow and the bitter reality of another harsh winter night. Marcus Williams pulled his wool coat tighter as he stepped out of the gleaming glass tower that housed Williams and Associates, the marketing firm he had built from nothing over the past 15 years. At 42, Marcus had achieved what many would consider the American dream. His company employed over 300 people, his penthouse apartment overlooked Lake Michigan, and his bank account reflected years of smart decisions and relentless work. But success, he had learned, could be a lonely companion. The streets were mostly empty as Marcus made his way toward the parking garage. It was past 10 in the evening, and most sensible people were already home, warm and safe with their families. Marcus tried not to think about the silence that would greet him when he opened his apartment door, or the takeout dinner that would serve as his only company for the night. His divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, and while he had thrown himself into work with renewed vigor, the empty spaces in his life had only grown larger. As he rounded the corner onto Madison Street, something caught his attention. At the bus stop ahead, huddled against the wind, was a figure that seemed far too small and fragile to be out on such a night. As Marcus drew closer, he could see it was a young girl, maybe 16 or 17, wearing nothing but a thin sweater and jeans. Her shoulders were shaking, and he couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from crying. Marcus had always been the type to notice things others missed. It was a skill that had served him well in business, allowing him to spot opportunities and problems before his competitors. But this wasn't about business. This was about a kid who looked like she was in serious trouble. He slowed his pace, unsure of what to do. In today's world, approaching a young person you didn't know could be misunderstood. But the temperature was dropping fast, and the weather report had called for snow. Nobody should be out here dressed like that, especially not someone so young. Marcus stopped about 10 feet away from the bus stop. The girl looked up at him, and what he saw in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. They were dark brown, almost black in the dim streetlight, and filled with a kind of desperation he recognized from his own childhood. These were the eyes of someone who had nowhere to go. "Excuse me," Marcus said gently, keeping his distance to avoid seeming threatening. "Are you waiting for a bus?" The girl studied him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether he was safe or just another person who might hurt her. She had shoulder-length black hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days, and her face, though dirty and tear-streaked, had the kind of natural beauty that would have made her stand out in any crowd under better circumstances. "The buses stopped running an hour ago," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus felt his heart sink. "Do you have somewhere to go? Someone you can call?" The question seemed to hit her like a slap. Her eyes filled with tears again, and she shook her head quickly. "No, there's nobody." The words hung in the cold air between them. Marcus found himself thinking about his nephew, James, who was about the same age as this girl. What would he want someone to do if James was out here alone and scared? "What's your name?" Marcus asked, taking a small step closer. "Emma," she said, wrapping her arms around herself tighter. "Emma, I'm Marcus. I can see you're in some kind of trouble, and I want you to know that you don't have to face it alone. When was the last time you ate something?" Emma looked at him suspiciously. "Why do you care?" It was a fair question, and Marcus found himself struggling to answer it. Why did he care? He didn't know this girl. He had no obligation to get involved in whatever situation she was dealing with. But something about her reminded him of himself at 17, when his own mother had kicked him out for the final time, and he had spent 3 nights sleeping in an abandoned car before a teacher noticed something was wrong. Because nobody should be out here alone on a night like this, Marcus said simply. Especially not someone your age. Emma stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her trying to decide whether to trust him. He remained perfectly still, letting her make the choice. I haven't eaten since yesterday, she admitted finally. Marcus felt a surge of anger, not at Emma, but at whatever circumstances had led to this moment. A 17-year-old girl shouldn't be going hungry. She shouldn't be out here in the cold with nowhere to go. There's a 24-hour diner about 3 blocks from here, Marcus said. Would you let me buy you some food? No strings attached. Just a meal and a warm place to sit for a while. Emma's eyes narrowed. What do you want in return? The question broke Marcus's heart. This girl had clearly learned to expect the worst from people, and he wondered what kind of experiences had taught her that kindness always came with a price. Nothing, Marcus said firmly. I just want to make sure you're safe and fed. That's all. Emma studied his face in the dim light, looking for any sign of deception. Marcus stood perfectly still, letting her see that he meant what he said. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said, but just food. And you stay where I can see you. Of course, Marcus agreed. Whatever makes you feel safe. As they walked toward the diner, Marcus learned bits and pieces of Emma's story. She had been living with her aunt since her parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. But her aunt's boyfriend had been making her life hell, and things had finally reached a breaking point that morning when he had tried to assault her. Emma had fought him off and run, but not before her aunt accused her of lying and told her never to come back. She chose him over me, Emma said quietly as they sat in a corner booth at the diner. After everything we've been through together, she chose him. Marcus watched as Emma devoured the burger and fries he had ordered for her, trying to process the magnitude of betrayal she had experienced. To lose your parents and then be abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect you. He couldn't imagine the pain she was carrying. Where were you planning to sleep tonight? Marcus asked gently. Emma shrugged. I don't know. Maybe back at the bus stop. Maybe find a doorway somewhere. The casual way she said it told Marcus that she had already accepted the possibility of freezing to death on the streets. This was a kid who had given up hope, who had been failed by every adult who was supposed to care for her. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Emma, he said, leaning forward slightly. I have a guest room in my apartment. It has its own bathroom, and you'd be completely safe. You could stay there tonight, get a good night's sleep, and tomorrow we can figure out what your options are. Emma stopped eating and stared at him. You're serious? Dead serious, Marcus replied. I know this is a lot to ask you to trust a stranger, but I give you my word that you'll be safe. I'll even give you the key to the room so you can lock it from the inside. Emma was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could see her internal struggle. She wanted to accept. He could see it in her eyes, but she had been hurt too many times to trust easily. Why would you do that for me? She asked finally. Marcus thought about his answer carefully. He could tell her about his nephew, or about his own experiences growing up. He could explain his belief that successful people had an obligation to help those less fortunate. But, in the end, he settled on the simple truth. Because you remind me that there are more important things. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was silent except for the quiet hum of machinery and Emma's nervous breathing. Marcus could see her reflection in the polished steel doors, watching him with the wariness of someone who had learned to expect disappointment from every kindness. She clutched a small backpack to her chest, apparently the only possession she had managed to grab before fleeing her aunt's house. When the elevator doors opened to reveal the elegant hallway leading to Marcus's penthouse, Emma's eyes widened slightly. The soft lighting and expensive artwork on the walls were a world away from the cramped apartment she had shared with her aunt and the man who had destroyed her sense of safety. This is really where you live? Emma asked quietly as Marcus unlocked his door. It is, Marcus replied, stepping aside to let her enter first. I know it's probably different from what you're used to, but I want you to feel comfortable here. Emma stepped into the spacious apartment and stopped, overwhelmed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. The living room was decorated in warm earth tones, with comfortable leather furniture and soft lighting that made everything feel welcoming despite the obvious expense. "I've never seen anything like this," Emma admitted, her voice filled with wonder. Marcus watched her take in her surroundings and felt a pang of guilt. Here he was, living in luxury while kids like Emma struggled just to find a safe place to sleep. How many other teenagers were out there right now, facing the same impossible choices Emma had faced today? "Let me show you to your room," Marcus said gently. "You must be exhausted." The guest room was larger than the entire living room in Emma's aunt's apartment. It had its own bathroom, a comfortable queen-sized bed with fresh linens, and a small sitting area by the window. Marcus had decorated it simply but tastefully, thinking it might be used for business associates or family members visiting from out of town. He had never imagined it would serve as a sanctuary for a homeless teenager. "This is all for me?" Emma asked, setting her backpack down carefully on a chair. "It's yours for as long as you need it," Marcus assured her. He handed her a key from his keychain. "This locks the door from the inside. You're in complete control of your space here." Emma took the key and held it tightly, as if it were the most precious thing she had ever owned. In a way, Marcus realized it probably was. For someone who had been powerless for so long, having control over her own safety was invaluable. "The bathroom has everything you need," Marcus continued. "Fresh towels, soap, shampoo. There's a robe hanging behind the door if you want to wash your clothes. The washing machine and dryer are in the laundry room down the hall." Emma nodded, still clutching the key. "What about tomorrow? What happens then?" It was the question Marcus had been dreading, because he didn't have a good answer. Legally, Emma was still a minor, which meant there were rules and procedures that governed what could happen to her. But Marcus also knew that the system designed to protect kids like Emma often failed them spectacularly. "Tomorrow we figure out what your options are," Marcus said honestly. "But tonight, you just rest. You're safe here, Emma. I promise you that." After showing Emma where to find extra blankets and explaining how to use the apartment's security system, Marcus retreated to his own bedroom and tried to process what he had just done. He had brought a complete stranger into his home, a vulnerable teenager who was probably traumatized and definitely in need of more help than he was qualified to provide. But as he lay in bed that night, listening to the sound of water running in Emma's bathroom, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt needed. For the first time since his divorce, someone was depending on him for more than just business decisions and profit margins. The next morning, Marcus woke to the smell of coffee and something that might have been breakfast. He found Emma in the kitchen, wearing the robe he had mentioned and carefully flipping pancakes on his expensive stovetop. "I hope it's okay," Emma said when she saw him. "I found the ingredients in your pantry. I wanted to do something to say thank you." Marcus was touched by the gesture, but he was also concerned. "Emma, you don't need to cook for me. You're not here to work. You're here to be safe." "I know," Emma said, plating the pancakes with surprising skill. "But cooking helps me think. And I've been doing a lot of thinking." They sat at Marcus's dining table, which offered another spectacular view of the city, and ate breakfast together. Marcus learned that Emma had been cooking since she was 12, when her parents both worked double shifts and she had to take care of herself. She had dreams of going to culinary school someday, but those dreams had seemed impossible even before yesterday's crisis. "What do you think will happen to me?" Emma asked as she cleared their plates. Marcus had spent most of the night researching Emma's options online, and the results were not encouraging. As a 17-year-old with no legal guardian, Emma would likely end up in the foster care system, which had its own set of problems and uncertainties. There were shelters and group homes, but many were overcrowded and understaffed. "There are several possibilities," Marcus said carefully. "The most important thing is finding you a situation where you'll be safe and supported." Emma nodded, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. She had already been failed by the adults who were supposed to protect her. The idea of being placed with strangers who might not care about her well-being was terrifying. Marcus's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was his assistant, reminding him about a client meeting that morning. As he listened to the details of the presentation he was supposed to give, Marcus realized that he had absolutely no interest in going to the office. For the first time in 15 years, Work felt completely unimportant. Cancel it, Marcus told his assistant. Reschedule everything for tomorrow. Everything? His assistant asked, clearly surprised. Even the Morrison account review. Everything, Marcus confirmed. I have something more important to handle today. When Marcus hung up, Emma was staring at him. You don't have to miss work because of me, she said. I can take care of myself. I know you can, Marcus replied. You've been taking care of yourself for a long time. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. The words surprised Marcus as much as they surprised Emma. He hadn't planned to say them, but they felt absolutely true. Somewhere in the space of 12 hours, this scared teenager had become important to him in a way he couldn't fully explain. They spent the morning talking about Emma's situation and researching her options. Marcus called a lawyer who specialized in family law and learned about the process for placing unaccompanied minors. He also called a social worker who could help navigate the system and ensure Emma's safety throughout the process. But as the day wore on, Marcus found himself hoping that there might be another option, one that would allow Emma to stay exactly where she was. Marcus, Emma said that afternoon as they sat in his living room. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you just call the police last night? Most people would have just called someone else to handle it. Marcus considered the question seriously. Because I remembered what it felt like to be 17 and scared and have nowhere to go, he said finally. And because calling someone else would have been the easy thing to do, not necessarily the right thing. Emma was quiet for a moment. What happened to you when you were 17? Marcus told her about his childhood, the alcoholic mother who had kicked him out repeatedly, the nights he had slept in cars and abandoned buildings, the teacher who had finally helped him find stability and focus on his education. He told her about working 3 jobs to put himself through college and the determination that had driven him to build his company from nothing. So you understand, Emma said when he finished. I understand what it's like to feel like the world has given up on you, Marcus replied. But I also understand that sometimes one person believing in you can change everything. As evening approached, Marcus realized that he dreaded the thought of Emma leaving his apartment to face whatever the system had in store for her. She had brought something to his life that he hadn't even realized was missing, a sense of purpose that went beyond professional achievement. Emma, Marcus said as they prepared dinner together. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. Emma looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. Okay, how would you feel about staying here? Not just for tonight, but for as long as you need. We could make it legal. I could apply to become your guardian. You could finish high school, maybe even think about culinary school. Emma's knife stopped moving. She stared at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. You barely know me, she said finally. That's true, Marcus admitted. But I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and stronger than anyone your age should have to be. I know you deserve a chance to build the life you want. And I know that having you here has made me remember what really matters. The next few weeks tested both Marcus and Emma in ways neither had anticipated. The legal system, designed to protect children, was also designed to be skeptical of unusual arrangements like theirs. Social workers wanted to know why a successful businessman with no children would suddenly want to become the guardian of a teenage girl he had just met. Background checks needed to be completed, home visits scheduled, and references verified. Margaret Shun, the social worker assigned to Emma's case, was a kind but thorough woman in her 50s who had seen too many good intentions go wrong. She sat in Marcus's living room on a Tuesday morning, asking questions that made both Marcus and Emma uncomfortable. Mr. Williams, Margaret said, consulting her notes. You've never been married, have no children of your own, and work 60-hour weeks. What makes you think you're prepared to take responsibility for a teenager? Marcus had been asking himself the same question for days. The honest answer was that he wasn't prepared at all. He had no experience with teenage girls, no knowledge of what Emma needed emotionally or practically. He was operating purely on instinct, and the growing certainty that letting Emma go into the system would be a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. I don't think I'm prepared, Marcus admitted. But I think preparation and willingness are 2 different things. I'm willing to learn whatever I need to learn. I'm willing to change whatever I need to change in my life to make sure Emma has what she needs. Emma, sitting beside Marcus on the couch, spoke up. Can I say something? Margaret nodded encouragingly. I know this looks weird from the outside, Emma said, choosing her words carefully. A rich guy wanting to help some random homeless girl. But Marcus saved my life. Not just from freezing to death that night, but from giving up completely. He's the first adult who ever kept a promise to me. Margaret made notes as Emma spoke, her expression neutral but not unkind. Emma, how do you feel about the possibility of living here permanently? This would be a big change from anything you've experienced before. Emma looked around the luxurious apartment, then at Marcus. It feels too good to be true, she said honestly. But Marcus makes me feel like maybe I deserve good things. Like maybe my parents' death doesn't mean my life has to be over too. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from Marcus's financial stability to his plans for Emma's education to how they would handle typical teenage issues like dating and curfews. Some questions were easy to answer. Others revealed how much they still had to learn about each other. After Margaret left, promising to compile her report and make a recommendation, Marcus and Emma sat in silence for a while. The legal process had made their arrangement feel more real, but also more fragile. There was a possibility that the answer would be no, that Emma would be placed elsewhere regardless of what they both wanted. What if they say I can't stay? Emma asked quietly. Marcus had been dreading this question. Then, we'll figure out another way, he said firmly. I'm not giving up on this, Emma. Whatever it takes. While they waited for the legal system to make its decision, Marcus began making changes to his life that would have been unimaginable just a month before. He hired additional staff to handle some of his responsibilities at work, allowing him to maintain regular hours for the first time in years. He researched the best private schools in Chicago and arranged for Emma to visit several of them. The biggest change, however, was how Marcus viewed his own success. The money and recognition that had once felt so important now served a different purpose. They were tools he could use to give Emma opportunities she had never imagined possible. Emma was also adjusting to a life that felt surreal in its comfort and stability. She had her own room, her own bathroom, and access to more food than she could eat. But, more importantly, she had someone who asked about her day, who helped her with homework, and who never made her feel like a burden. The trust between them grew slowly but steadily. Emma shared more details about her life before meeting Marcus. The constant worry about money when she lived with her parents, the way her aunt had changed after meeting her boyfriend, the nights she had gone to bed hungry because there simply wasn't enough food. Marcus shared his own stories about building his business, his failed marriage, and the loneliness that had consumed him before Emma entered his life. One evening, as they cooked dinner together, Emma asked Marcus something that had been bothering her. Do you ever worry that people think you're trying to buy yourself a family? Marcus paused in his chopping of onions. It was a fair question, and one that reflected Emma's sharp intelligence and sensitivity to how others might perceive their situation. Do you think that's what I'm doing? Marcus asked. Emma considered this seriously. No, she said finally. If you wanted to buy a family, you could have adopted a baby or found some perfect kid whose parents died in a car accident. You wouldn't have picked a 17-year-old with trust issues and no money. Marcus smiled at her blunt assessment. You're right. And honestly, I do worry about what people think sometimes. But then, I remember that what matters is what we know to be true. I know that having you here has made me a better person. I know that you deserve every opportunity one can give you. And I know that this isn't about money or image. It's about two people who needed each other finding exactly that. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call from Margaret Chin. Marcus answered with Emma sitting beside him, both of them holding their breath. Mr. Williams, Margaret said, I've completed my evaluation and I'm pleased to tell you that I'll be recommending approval of your guardianship application. Emma is clearly thriving in your care, and it's obvious that this arrangement is beneficial for both of you. Marcus closed his eyes in relief, and Emma let out a small sob of happiness. They had cleared the first major hurdle. The legal proceedings took another month to complete, involving court appearances and additional paperwork. But on a cold February morning, Marcus and Emma stood in a judge's chambers as Marcus officially became Emma's legal guardian. The ceremony was simple, just the judge, a court clerk, Margaret Chun, and the two of them. But it felt more momentous than any business deal Marcus had ever closed. Congratulations, Judge Rodriguez said after signing the final papers. "You're officially a family." As they left the courthouse, Emma slipped her hand into Marcus's. It was a small gesture, but it represented everything they had built together: trust, commitment, and the kind of love that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice. "So what now?" Emma asked as they walked down the courthouse steps. "Now we live our lives," Marcus replied. "You go to school, I go to work, and we figure out how to be a family one day at a time." Emma had enrolled at Lincoln Park Academy, one of Chicago's most prestigious private schools. The transition was challenging. She was academically behind in some subjects and socially unprepared for the world of privileged teenagers. But she was also motivated in a way that impressed her teachers and gradually won over her classmates. Marcus attended every parent-teacher conference, school play, and academic award ceremony. He learned about teenage mood swings, the importance of having the right shoes, and how to have conversations about topics he had never imagined discussing. Emma learned about business strategy, financial planning, and what it meant to have someone believe in your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They had arguments about curfews, disagreements about Emma's choice of friends, and moments when the gap in their backgrounds created misunderstandings. But they also had something many biological families never achieve: the knowledge that they had chosen each other deliberately and completely. One evening in spring, as they sat on Marcus's balcony watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, Emma brought up a topic that had been on her mind for weeks. "Marcus, I've been thinking about my aunt," she said carefully. Marcus set down his coffee cup and gave Emma his full attention. They had talked about Emma's aunt several times, always with Emma expressing hurt and anger about being abandoned when she needed help most. "What about her?" Marcus asked. "I think I want to see her," Emma said. "Not to go back or anything like that, but to tell her that I'm okay. To let her know that I don't hate her." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of him was angry at Emma's aunt for failing her so completely, but another part of him was proud of Emma for wanting to offer forgiveness to someone who probably didn't deserve it. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Marcus asked. "You don't owe her anything, Emma." "I know," Emma replied. "But I owe it to myself. I don't want to carry anger around forever. And maybe she needs to know that choosing him over me had consequences, but that I survived them." They planned the visit carefully. Marcus offered to go with Emma, but she wanted to face her aunt alone. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop near Emma's old neighborhood. Marcus waited in the car outside, ready to intervene if needed. The conversation between Emma and her aunt was brief and painful. Emma's aunt cried, apologized, and begged for forgiveness. She explained that she had left the abusive boyfriend and realized too late what she had done to Emma. But Emma had moved beyond needing her aunt's explanations or promises. "I forgive you," Emma told her aunt. "But I can't trust you again. I have a family now, one that chose me and fights for me. I just wanted you to know that I'm okay." When Emma returned to the car, she was crying, but also smiling. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Free," Emma said simply. "I feel free." As spring turned into summer, Emma's transformation became even more apparent. She had gained weight and muscle from regular meals and exercise. Her hair was healthy and styled. Her clothes fit properly and reflected her own taste rather than whatever she could find or afford. But the most significant change was in her confidence and outlook. Emma began talking about her future with excitement rather than resignation. She researched culinary schools, studied French cooking techniques in her spare time, and even started a cooking blog that gained a small but devoted following. Marcus found himself looking forward to their evening cooking sessions, where Emma would teach him techniques she had learned online or from library books. "You know what's funny?" Emma said one evening as they prepared a complicated Thai dish together. "What's that?" Marcus replied, struggling to julienne vegetables the way Emma had shown him. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing my parents, and then my aunt meant I was completely alone. But now I think maybe everything that happened was supposed to happen, so I could end up here with you." Marcus paused in his chopping and looked at Emma. She was focused on her knife work, but there was something peaceful in her expression that hadn't been there when they first met. "Do you really believe that?" Marcus asked. The arrival of Emma's senior year of high school brought both excitement and unexpected challenges that would test everything Marcus and Emma had built together. Emma was now 18, legally an adult, but still very much Marcus's daughter in every way that mattered. She had grown into a confident, articulate young woman whose academic achievements and culinary talents had earned her acceptance to several prestigious culinary programs. But success, as Marcus had learned in his own life, often came with complications. The first challenge emerged from an unexpected source. Marcus's ex-wife, Catherine, who had been notably absent. Emma looked up and smiled. "I believe that sometimes terrible things happen for no reason, but sometimes terrible things lead to the best things. I believe I was meant to be your daughter, even though it took a really roundabout way to get here." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I believe that too," he said quietly. As they finished cooking and sat down to eat their meal, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had changed. A year ago, he had been successful but isolated, wealthy but emotionally impoverished. Now he was still successful and wealthy, but he was also something much more important. He was a father to an extraordinary young woman who had taught him what it meant to love someone more than himself. Emma had found more than just a safe place to live. She had found someone who saw her potential and was committed to helping her achieve it. She had found a family that would never abandon her, no matter what challenges they faced. They were building something together that neither had expected to find, a bond that was stronger than biology and deeper than circumstance. They were proving that family isn't always about who raised you, but sometimes about who refuses to give up on you when everyone else has walked away. Emma set down the knife and turned to face him fully. "What if I mess up? What if I'm too broken to be part of a normal family?" "First of all," Marcus said, "I'm probably more broken than you are. And second, we wouldn't be a normal family. We'd be our own kind of family, the kind that chooses each other and decides that love is more important than biology." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the good kind this time. "You really mean it?" "I've never meant anything more in my life," Marcus replied. "You're safe with me, Emma. And if you'll let me, I'd like to make that permanent." The hug that followed was tentative at first, as if neither of them quite believed it was real. But as they held each other in the warm light of Marcus's kitchen, both of them felt something they had been missing for far too long, the sense of belonging to someone who would never give up on them. The legal process would be complicated, and there would be challenges ahead that neither of them could anticipate. But in that moment, they had found what they had both been searching for without knowing it. They had found family, GS in life than business meetings, and profit margins, he said. "Because helping you feels like the most meaningful thing I've done in years." Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different. These weren't tears of despair, but something that might have been hope. "You're really not going to hurt me?" she whispered. "Never," Marcus said with absolute conviction. "You're safe with me. Let's go." As they left the diner and walked toward Marcus's apartment building, neither of them could have imagined how profoundly this moment would reshape their futures. Emma had found something she had given up believing in, an adult who would keep her safe without asking for anything in return. And Marcus had discovered that the family he had been searching for might not be the one he had expected, but it was exactly the one he needed. The snow had started to fall as they reached the apartment building, coating the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. As they stepped into the warm lobby, Marcus looked at Emma and saw not just a girl in need of help, but someone who might teach him what it really meant to matter to another person. The journey that would transform them both from strangers into family was just beginning.